Welcome everyone to What the Force, and welcome to a discussion of Adolescence and Star Wars. And with me today is Amber Koch.
Hi.
And Lisa Renee.
Hi.
We ended up having a really interesting discussion online about kind of how Star Wars is about growing up, adolescence, and really just showing kids especially how to grow up and get through those difficult adolescent stages. And I actually see that there's three different kind of takes on adolescence because of the three different trilogies. It actually shows kind of, with 1, 2, 3, kind of failure. And when things go totally horribly awry, we get to see the hero's journey and that classic monomyth of growing up with the original trilogy. And then we get a kind of different take that we seem to be developing in the sequel trilogy. This all kind of started about talking about Kylo Ren, though. How we kind of all were talking about really the interesting things that it meant to us for Star Wars itself and adolescence and growing up. Let's start with Lisa first. Lisa, what did you think of kind of this topic in your own words?
I mean, to be fair, I am not a huge fan of Kylo Ren. And I think that that's because for me, growing up was tied so much to Han Solo. It was the character that I liked the most. And then to watch his kid kill him was really rough for me. So when I think about Ben Solo and growing up in a way that he has turned evil, he would kill his parents, he would start this in some way, rebellion against the rebellion itself. It was hard for me. And in a lot of ways, I wanted, more to understand why that happened, and understand a little bit more about, how, and I think for me, I wanted to understand how we could get to a point where redemption was on the table when what I saw him do is fairly irredeemable.
Right, because it's a tough thing to kind of view a character that you've known and loved and see, oh, this kid, this child of his has killed him. How can you come back from that, right? And Amber, sorry, go ahead.
I said, even though it's kind of part of the hero's journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
This idea, and you've had it in all kinds of other media where you kill the parent, and some can see that as a way to pass the torch, and some can see that as a way to move on beyond the childhood that you felt wasn't good. So I think that there's a lot of literary history that would explain some of why that would be the trope used. I can't say that I have ever enjoyed it, and I certainly didn't enjoy this one. But with that said, I am open to the idea of a redemption arc because
you like them.
I like them. Yeah.
Amber, you brought up some really great points too, and I want to hear those kind of in your own words. I think that those were really great to talk about.
Thing about, for me, Kylo Ren and his redemption and everything is it's rooted very personally for me, first and foremost. I don't know if we'll, get into this more, but basically I have a lot of identifying emotions with Kylo Ren. Similar to you, Lisa, I grew up watching Star Wars, and my thing was, for me, my dad was Han Solo in the way. I didn't feel like I really related to anybody in the original trilogy. And so it wasn't really this thing for me where I identified with them and I put myself in their shoes and I rooted for them because they were me sort of thing. It was very much hey, Han Solo's like my dad. And so I rooted for him based on that. And so when the sequel trilogy came around and Kylo Ren existed, it broke me in a lot of ways because I was I can't believe that the person I relate to most in this entire movie is the villain. When Kylo killed Han Solo, I was devastated because I did love Han Solo. He was my dad. And so it was just a really heartbreaking sort of thing for me. But then the more I thought about it and the more that got released about Kylo Ren, I realized that, like, that was really my kind of history, because much like Kylo Ren, I had two parents who were important people to the community, and they were both very busy and they didn't always have time for me. And I sort of grew up alone and to fend for myself. And, you know, we talked about how Snoke is kind of an allegory for mental illness. And so as I was growing up, I had my own voices in my ear whispering to me and telling me these awful things and trying to get me to do awful things. Eventually, you know, obviously I didn't commit patricide, but, you know, I ended up just completely going against all of my parents' wishes for my own life. And in a way, you know, I kind of ran my lightsaber through my father's heart when I dropped out of college, because that was all he really wanted for me. I really do see Kylo Ren as a relatable character, in the sense that, you know, there's a lot of us who had parents who both worked and were busy and couldn't really be around. And, you know, you have the mental illness come in, you have the failure aspect come in, and it can really break a person. And you sort of see where Kylo's mental break came in, because you've been there. You've been laying on your living room floor sobbing uncontrollably because nothing has gone right and you just don't know what to do, and you take the most unhealthy way into coping.
I also identify with Kylo Ren in that, like, I didn't feel like I fit in, you know, into kind of any societal norms. I felt always kind of outside of it. And I also disappointed my father with regards to university in changing my major. So that's really funny, Amber, that we both had that experience.
I also had that.
Really?
Yeah, he wanted me to be a doctor. I'm a lawyer.
Oh, tragic.
Oh, but you have no idea. It really crushed him. I quit out of all the chemistry in my freshman year. He still brings it up, and I'm in my 30s. So, I mean, you can disappoint your parents in every way possible, and I've also been there where I felt like I didn't fit in. And that's actually interesting to me, because my feeling like I didn't fit in high school made me identify, I think, the most with Han Solo in this slow, begrudging crawl into being part of something bigger than yourself.
Right.
I think for me, it was more personal when he died, because he was who I identified with. But I do have the whole, I'm not going to say that my parents ignored me. They didn't. I'm not going to say my parents shoved me off somewhere to, you know, study anything where they weren't. That wasn't my upbringing. But, you know, everyone, I think, can identify with that slow creeping voice of, you know, mental illness and demons, because I think that it's a common feeling, especially for a lot of millennials, as we become more aware of our own propensity to mental illness as a society. I understand that too, which is why when I think we first had this conversation several months ago, I was saying I didn't want a redemption story for Kylo Ren. But in that time, I thought about it, and I do, because I don't believe that people are the worst of themselves. And I do want to see people pick themselves up and be better, whatever form that takes. So I did think about it a lot since that conversation.
Yeah, it's so funny because we started this and we're like, let's record, and then we couldn't get our schedules to work out together. But what I really think is important with the narrative and with this fantastical, because it is fantastical, this world with laser swords and space wizards and these phenomenal cosmic powers that the Jedi and Sith can wield, is that it's to put everything into sharp focus. It's like mythology made real. And it's to bring focus to these everyday problems that we as humans face that, you know, might seem impossible, crying on the floor, as you said, Amber, like in the moment. But hey, Kylo killed his dad, you know? If there's a way back from Kylo killing his dad, maybe my disappointing my father isn't the end of me. maybe the car accident I got into when I made a mistake isn't the end of me. Redemption stories show that even the worst challenges and problems that we face can be overcome. And I think that might be why you love them so much, Lisa.
And I mean, I think, you also have this, well, I guess I do. I have this desire to see a redemption story for what society is what society's going through right now, right? So I want to see things change. I want to see somebody who has a viewpoint that is so antithetical to my own can learn and, come around to doing the right thing. I want to see that. I want to see somebody who has done something evil, who has gone the wrong way, turn around in a way different than, an Anakin who you see at the very end before he dies. We get a whole movie maybe of a redemption story. And I like the idea of that. I'd like to see where it goes. I hope that it goes somewhere big, but
Yeah. Yeah. Amber, I think we talked a little bit because I think you and I are a little bit older than Lisa, but I could be wrong.
I am 31.
Okay, so I might be older than both of you. How old are you, Lisa?
37.
Okay, I'm 36. So we're older than Amber.
Yay.
Yes, and you are the oldest one of all of us.
Just turned 37, if that helps.
Okay.
I'm almost 32.
Well, we're well within our 30s. So, I find that a lot of people that are, Kylo Ren supporters tend to fall in the younger age group, like they're just early 20s. They really identify with the struggles and maybe not fitting into the societal mold that their successful parents set for them. I find that what I think, Lisa, you and I are considered to be cuspers between the Gen Xers and millennials. And not that I agree with the generational theories, because it always comes down to the older generations think the younger generations are whack.
Whack.
Well, like they don't have their stuff together. Well, obviously, because they're young. They don't know what they're doing. They haven't figured it all out, and their value structure is very different than the older generation. And the older generation that we have to contend with is the baby boomers.
Never mind the fact that each generation has their own society that they're going through and trying to navigate. It's not like you can listen to the advice of the elders because, my dad managed to, get a degree by working part-time 10 hours a week and paid for it all himself, and I'm $20,000 in student loan debt.
Oh God, I'm a lawyer. I don't even want to talk to him. I'm never going to be out of debt. I don't even understand what not having debt would be like.
Your monthly payment and the interest are basically the same thing.
Oh my God, I can't even understand. And it's like I've been paying my student loans now for something like 9 years. So I looked at the numbers today and freaked out. So it's like the generational gap is baffling to me, because when you look at the baby boomers saying that they don't understand, they say they don't understand Gen Xers, they say they don't understand millennials, they don't understand why we want things for free and all that kind of stuff. I'm always like, is this going to be me one day? Am I going to look down at whoever's after millennials and be like, these little whippersnappers, they do this weird crap and they're all misfits, but how can they all be misfits?
Yeah.
I have to believe really that we can learn from the mistakes that people have made and be better. And I think that that's kind of, also important in Star Wars, that you can learn from the mistakes of the past.
That's basically the lesson of Episode 8.
Yeah.
You sound a lot like Luke Skywalker right now.
Yeah, and Yoda, right? Failure.
Yeah.
Learn from your failure.
And what's actually interesting about that, that was such a hard lesson for me growing up, was that you have to sometimes fail to succeed so that you understand where you're going. And it's partly that journey and not the destination, that was so hard for me. I don't want to say it's actually easy for me now because it's still not, but that was the hardest part, I think, for me was, you know, letting that journey happen. And I think why I liked the original trilogy so much is because it was that journey. It was people growing up and people becoming more conscious of themselves and understanding things mostly through failure, but also, you know, friendship, right? And having people there in your corner was a big thing too. This found family. I responded to that. And I still, I think in the sequels, I do also respond to that. It's just, I've had a hard time with the sequels for many different reasons, but mostly Han Solo's death. So I just think that when you look into like generational gaps and what people are going to glean from these things, if people are looking at Kylo Ren and identifying with Kylo Ren, I really, really hope there's a redemption story because your life just can't be struggle like this. And I think that to me speaks, right? If you could take it, if it goes in a direction where there's hope, because isn't the like underlying theme of all of this hope, right?
Yeah.
There has to be a redemption story. There has to be something.
Because what does it mean if it isn't redemption? It means a troubled kid who maybe didn't have the right support structure for his unique and special circumstances, right? Unfortunately, can't figure out his way out, and we're almost giving up on a generation of kids that might feel lost like him.
It's very cynical.
And they're also hearing from older generations that they should just pick themselves up and get through it. And it's not that simple. And we know that it can't possibly be simple when, you know, you've got this strange brain connected man telling you what to do, you know.
Yeah.
And if that's the allegory for mental illness, then, you know, we're already seeing some idea of overcoming mental illness, but maybe not the most healthy way of overcoming mental illness.
Well, and the thing about mental illness that I've really learned is, you know, even when you take your medication and you go to therapy and you really think you're winning the battle, you've still developed habits that are very difficult to break out of. And so even if you do, you know, quote unquote, defeat your mental illness, you still have to do the work to get out of the bad habits that you've developed as someone with mental illness.
Right. I mean, you can't just all of a sudden, I mean, you know, take someone's hand and go to the light side. You can't do that. That's not how it works because you have negative coping mechanisms. I've been told many times I have so many negative coping mechanisms, but, you know, that's actually the real work, right? It's figuring out the things that you did that didn't work and not doing them anymore. And, you know, and I think that for people who are, I guess, millennials and younger, to know that doing that work is worthwhile is also a redemption story in and of itself.
Yeah, I feel like if it can affect even, you know, one kid and show one kid, hey, there's hope. Like you said, Lisa, there's a chance. There's something always worth fighting for. And what I want to bring back is this concept of balance, which from a psychological perspective, when kids are growing up and they become adolescents, they go through this phase where their risk-reward ratio is out of whack. They end up thinking, you know, not incorrectly because it's their own view on what is good, right? And what is worth it to get the good reward. And usually it ends up having to do with some sort of social reward that, you know, they're getting something out of this, but they're willing to take more risks and they're willing to go through more dangers to be able to get whatever reward they need out of this. And if I were to frame Kylo Ren in that structure, because originally they talked about making both him and Rey teenagers, and they chose not to, I think probably for a few narrative reasons, but he still acts very much like a teenage boy. And he specifically is looking for belonging and acceptance. That's his sort of social reward. And he is willing to literally burn down the galaxy, all of that risk, to be able to get that. I just find that really, really powerful as an allegory for any child, or a metaphor for any child that is growing up and trying to figure out who they are. It's just really interesting.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I know for a fact that I am an only child for the most part. I have an older half brother, but he lived with his mom. So I pretty much grew up by myself, having to entertain myself. So when I started school, I was prepared to, say that I liked My Little Pony or something like that, even though I thought My Little Pony was kind of dumb. And obviously that's a very minute sort of connection to it, but I completely changed my personality as a child and a tween and a teenager in order to get people to like me. And I compromised a lot of my own personal values just to get friends. So I see a lot of the necessity in belonging, because currently Kylo Ren thinks that his belonging, well, not currently, but when we are first introduced to him, he thinks his belonging is with Snoke, with the First Order, all of that. And, he really embodies the whole persona of someone who is an enforcer within the First Order, someone who's intimidating and callous and violent. And so as it goes on and you see that Kylo Ren actually finds his belonging, in his mind with Rey, sees that they have a connection and she's really similar to him in ways. It's interesting to me that his temper tantrums actually become more infrequent. We saw a lot of temper tantrums in The Force Awakens, and we saw one at the very beginning of The Last Jedi, and then he didn't really temper tantrum up until the point that Rey rejects him. And then it's back to, well, she's not my belonging. I have to be with the First Order. I'm going back to that Kylo Ren. I'm not going to be Ben Solo anymore, because that didn't work in the sense of belonging.
Yeah, and so he puts up this bravado and ends up smacking Hux against the wall.
So beautiful.
I mean, I think a sense of belonging is another, overarching theme for Star Wars in general. Just everyone wanted that sense of belonging and that sense of safety and that sense of, an ability to create the life that they want for themselves and the people around them. I mean, that goes back to the prequels even. And, I think Anakin did a lot of the things that he did, the choices that he made out of that same need to belong and that same need to protect and that same desire to have the people that he cared about around him. He just didn't do it right. And, beware old men who whisper things in your ears, I guess.
Yikes.
I mean, look, I don't know. I would have never... I was a skeptical kid. I didn't really trust people that easily. I feel like Sheev Palpatine would have not been the first choice I would have made for a mentor.
Well, but, I mean, if think about it, he wasn't the first choice.
No, he wasn't.
Qui-Gon was the first choice. Obi-Wan was the second choice. And then when he felt like everyone around him had failed him and shut him out, that's when he started really trusting Palpatine.
And also Obi-Wan had made it clear that Anakin was not even his first choice. Yep.
Yeah.
For me, when you look at like what rejection does to a person, especially in adolescence, right? So you have Anakin being rejected in some ways by Obi-Wan and definitely by the Jedi Council, right? So he doesn't have the things that he thinks he should have, and he doesn't have the friendships that he thinks he wants. He latches on to what is available to him, and Palpatine, took advantage of that. I think that you also have that mirrored in Kylo Ren. We don't know what happened to him between the ages of whatever he was in Last Shot and Force Awakens. We don't even know that Darth Vader was related to him for a long time if you read Bloodline. So, I mean, there's secrets, right? And then there's the fact that he was sent to Luke, and maybe he didn't want to go. maybe he felt rejected by his parents. Maybe he felt like everything else was more important than he was. And maybe, Luke wasn't as great of a teacher as he could have been. We really don't know a ton, but we do know that if you follow the themes in Star Wars, rejection just is a big deal. And I think that that's something that people have attached themselves to, and how they process through rejection, I think is how people can end up attaching themselves to certain characters.
It's really interesting that you brought up the bloodline thing, because I knew that, right? I've read the book like 3 times, but I didn't really put it together just until you just said that. He had 3 legends who were contributing to him growing up. He probably felt inadequate his whole life, in that maybe he was frustrated. I know Leia described him in one of the books as, kind of being an emotional kid. He had his mom, his dad, who were all very important people. And then he had his Uncle Luke, who was literally a legend. You put that into frame, and then Snoke comes along, something happens. He finds out he is the grandson of Darth Vader, and he says, maybe this all makes sense. Maybe this is what I'm meant to be, the heir to Darth Vader. And that sense of belonging is suddenly there.
Y'all don't even want to know how upset it makes me that they never told him that Anakin Skywalker, because I think he knew Anakin Skywalker was his grandfather. I don't think he knew that Darth Vader was his grandfather. And I
don't even think that was well known.
No, because the whole point of Bloodline was that it blew it up.
I mean, I think that Anakin being the bloodline was known, but Anakin being Darth Vader just wasn't.
Yeah, well, I mean, Anakin Skywalker was pretty well known, and then here comes Luke Skywalker, and everyone's like, is this a common surname, or...
Right.
But no, it just upsets me so much, because, not to, to drag it back into my history, but again, this is why I relate to Ben Solo and Kylo Ren so much, is I spent a long time in my life just being really frustrated by the voices and feelings that I had, and I couldn't relate it to anything. I just thought I personally was broken. Had I known as a younger child that my mother also suffered from mental illness, I feel like I would have been a little bit more prepared to handle it. I would have understood, like, this is a thing that happens and it's okay, but you can fight it. And had Ben Solo just been given any sort of inkling that, like, it is in his family history to be tempted by the dark side and maybe even fall to it, but it's okay because you can fight against that, I think he would have been way more prepared than just, by the way, you need to completely, like, dampen out all your dark urges or your uncle's gonna kill you in your sleep. And also, your grandfather is Darth Vader.
Also, turn on the TV. There's something weird about your mom happening,
Oh, my theory with Bloodline, and where it fits into the whole, Luke trying to kill him or thinking that he should kill him, is that, because I really thought we were going to get a reference to Bloodline some way, that, like, oh, well, when he found out that he was related to Vader, but we didn't. And so I'm just like, well, why does that matter? And so what I think happened is, Luke tried to kill Ben. Ben, thought he killed Luke. He obviously fought with some other students who thought he was a monster for killing Luke. Other people fought with him. Anyway, he went to go see Leia to be like, I don't know what to do. Luke tried to kill me. But then the Vader reveal comes out as he's, like, going there to see his mom. And he's like, what the hell? And so that breaks him enough that he just goes to Snoke instead.
That's really interesting, because I saw it slightly different. I saw it as the darkness that Luke suddenly saw in Kylo was because of the big reveal, and now Ben is trying to process all of this, and Luke is just picking up this, like, negative dark energy, and because he's Luke, who golly gee willikers, Luke Skywalker kind of turned into, not really an emotional stalwart here, right? Like, he never really was, and then all of a sudden he had all this responsibility, and he, I thought, out of the original trilogy, didn't grow up all that much. In this new, canon, he didn't grow up all that much, and all of a sudden he's feeling this darkness, and his first urge is to kill it.
Well, I personally think that both Ben and Snoke were being, or bleh, Ben and Luke were both being pretty manipulated in that moment, because I think the images that Luke saw were planted there by Snoke, and I think that Snoke was also somewhat influencing Luke, and I think that Snoke also is the one that kind of helped Ben Solo wake up in that moment just in time to see his master trying to kill him.
Yeah, that's all. I think that's all a good theory, and I just think that like Snoke probably preyed on weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
If the big weaknesses, all of a sudden he saw on some sort of hollow or whatever, that this whole thing happened where Leia's like been outed as the daughter of Vader, then I mean, I think that's a huge weakness that Snoke could have exploited just to get in there and cause trouble, because he knew that that could be the big break that he had been waiting for. Because I think
Leia suspected that Snoke had been manipulating Ben since a young age, though. So I think that Snoke maybe understood who Vader was, like maybe some sort of Imperial knew and let Snoke know or something. And I've always gotten the impression that Ben is like haunted by the memories of Anakin in a way. Like I'm kind of a reverse Amidala person, so
Yeah.
I kind of think that maybe that Force ghost is actually haunting him from a young age, and it doesn't take that much to push that over the edge.
But I think that you can exploit a huge reveal, when Ben doesn't know, right? And all of a sudden there's this big reveal. That's a huge moment. And if you take it into like regular people and not in Star Wars universe, when something like that happens, it's almost catastrophic. And all the things that you could be working for, inner peace, taking your meds, whatever, it gets disrupted. And that's a big part of, struggling with mental illness, at least it was for me. And that's why I think it resonated with me that this was a big secret that shouldn't have been kept. And the reveal of which can't just be like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. Really awesome. Thank you.
I mean, I also think that I think that once Ben knew about Vader, that Snoke manipulated that aspect too, because Kylo Ren says, show me again the power of the dark side. And I just can't imagine Force Ghost Anakin having redeemed himself in, to the light side, being like, sure, grandson, let me just tell you how great the dark side is.
Unless it's nightmares, right? Like, we don't...
Well, but I think any nightmare he has is going to have been manipulated. The thing is I think that with Snoke being a metaphor for mental illness, in my interpretation, that he literally poisons everything about Ben, including his relationship with his grandfather. He's like making him think that that Anakin is coming to him, that Vader is coming to him and telling him like, hey, be this great, Sith sort of thing, because you can't really be a Sith, but like just be dark and finish what I started. Like, I really think that's manipulation from Snoke, because I highly doubt Anakin would be like, oh yeah, ruin it, ruin all of it, all the goodwill we did, just ruin it.
Yeah, no, I don't think that he would, but I get this. It comes from reading the Last Jedi novelization, and there's this scene where Luke is describing what he saw inside of Ben's head, and if you actually replace the word Ben with Anakin, it almost describes Vader to a T. Or Vader, right? And what I'm saying is, I agree with you that I think that Snoke manipulated him all the way along, but I also think that there is something base in him, to your point, Amber, that there is this dark side in him. There's this piece of him that doesn't quite fit, and he doesn't see himself in his parents, and he doesn't see himself in his Uncle Luke or his Uncle Londo, or Chewbacca. Like, he doesn't see himself in these good and beautiful people that have struggled to save this galaxy. And he is struggling with this piece that is also being pushed and manipulated, and the dark voice is talking to him.
Yep.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Poor Ben. We all want him to be redeemed, I think.
Okay, so to out myself, I am a Reylo shipper, but that's honestly secondary to Ben Solo redemption. Like, and the thing is I personally think we need Ben Solo redemption in order for Reylo to happen. It won't happen any other way. But as long as we get, like, Ben Solo redeemed, that's the only thing that really matters to me. And I don't want to be that person who's like, well, if Rey's not a Skywalker, I hate the movie. Like, I'm not going to be that person who's, oh, well, if Ben's not redeemed, I hate the movie. I'll be wholly disappointed because I have really staked a lot of my hopes and dreams on Ben Solo, especially because, Ben is Leia's only hope. So it's kind of like, it's just, I don't know. There's been too much hope symbolism played up with him for him to not be redeemed. And I feel like it would be like emotional blue balls for him to, like, die evil.
I also think that now that the 9th movie can't possibly be, Leia's arc, that it has to be something with Ben as a redemption arc, to end this on some sort of hopeful note. I just can't see him dying without some sort of redemption arc, without some sort of nod to, some sort of hopeful ending. I guess I originally wanted him to die a horrible fire pit death, but I don't think it makes sense in the narrative now at all. And I don't think I would want that.
Yeah, I think it's a really cynical sort of ending to be like, oh, the end of the Skywalker legacy ends in tragedy and misery, and this family that we've been trying to root for 9 movies is over. And, people argue that, like, oh, well, he could be redeemed in death. But the thing is Vader was redeemed in death because there was literally nothing else for him to sacrifice. He hadn't lost. He had lost, his family and whatnot 19 years, 23 years ago. And so, I was mathing, it was bad. But the thing with Ben is, like, he's already losing things. Like, he lost his dad, and yes, it was by his own hand, but that's a mythological trope. And, he's gonna lose his mom. That's almost guaranteed. Like, he is already, like, alone in the world. Vader would have had things to live for, He would have had his kids, even though I don't think Leia would have been super chill. But, it had to, for that to be tragic and bittersweet, he had to die. And Ben, on the other hand, for it to be, tragic and bittersweet, he has to live with what he's done and, still be a good person because of it, but understand that his actions led to, like, the emptiness that he has now because his father's gone and his mother's gone. And it's just because Han and Leia are gone, he can't die because he has to live with that. Anakin didn't have, like, a thing to suffer with anymore.
I mean, it's sort of this overarching theme or trope. It's Anakin was a hero because he killed himself for Luke to live, right? And I think that it has to be the opposite for Ben because that's the difference between them.
He has to live with his pain and the things that he's done. And why that's so important, in my opinion, is that it shows people, back to these adolescents, right, how to get past their pain and carry it forward with them and carry that baggage and find the balance.
Yeah. I mean, because I think that there's a lot of ways that him dying could be perceived pretty negatively to someone who has been struggling with mental illness and made a lot of bad choices because of it. Okay, well, the answer is you die. Like, that's not a great moral to put out there. So I definitely think living with it and struggling with it and learning to heal yourself is an important sort of moral to put out there if Ben Solo really is meant to be an allegory for like millennials and Snoke an allegory for mental illness and whatnot.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I think that there's more to it than even when we spoke about this before. When I guess I was still angry. Um, I you know I don't want him like skipping off into the sunset, but I do want him to live through it, to grow through it, because we saw everybody else grow up, whether we wanted them to grow up the way that they did, whether they had the character arc we wanted them to have at the end, maybe not, but we did get to see them grow up. And I think that I would want that for Ben too.
That's awesome.
I'm glad you've come to see the light side of Ben Solo's redemption.
I mean, it's actually a friend of mine pointed out that it was very weird for me because the line of work that I do, I want a redemption story for everyone that I represent. That's sort of my brand. And all of a sudden I was like, I hate him. He should die. And my friend was like, that's crazy from you. I've never even thought you could think that way about even a fictional character. And then I really thought to myself, would that really be what I would want, even for somebody who does something terrible? And the answer is like 100% no, that would never be something that I would want. So it made me think about how it would work in this universe, in the Star Wars universe, which, grew up with me, which was sort of my adolescence. And it came with me. What would I have wanted it to grow up and be like? And it wouldn't be, well, we just kill you. Because that's just not what I believe in general. So I thought about it a lot, and here's where I am.
And I think that what you went through is just so awesome in that, like, you thought about it. You're like, wait a second. Can I pull myself away from my attachment to, this previous generation and this character that I identify with or I find myself in and see it from another perspective, a different point of view. And I think that that's just really wonderful.
And I think that it actually fits because, if I identified growing up and, with Han Solo and to some extent, I guess, Leia as well, would they actually want their kid to die? And I just don't think that that's what they would have wanted either. It's a knee-jerk reaction that I just, carried with me for years. But, and really just thinking about it, it's more meaningful to the people growing up, and it's more meaningful as a story arc if he doesn't die and is in some way redeemed. And so, that's what I'm hoping for. And I'm hoping that even with Carrie being gone in the 9th movie, they can get there.
Yeah. I often wonder if it's going to be like R2-D2, like, I don't know, he's got some words of wisdom, or if they'll bring back Harrison Ford for a cameo and he's recorded something recorded on R2, or how they would bring back that parental component, because I think it's so important.
Billy D. Williams is going to be in episode 9.
He's on a diet now.
It's the no bread diet that Mark had to go on.
Well, okay, that sounds familiar. But yeah, so I think it is interesting that, Carrie passes away and then we get a book where it shows Lando and Ben to be, pretty cool, pretty close family, Uncle Wando and all that, Wanlo.
Yep.
And then, Billy D. Williams is going to be in episode 9. I was thinking perhaps they could use that, component to sort of stand in for, it's not quite the same, obviously.
Right.
I have to tell you, that book, Last Shot, is really a big part of why I sort of turned the corner on this redemption arc for little Ben.
Oh.
That's called marketing.
I know. Reading how his parents loved him, I was like, you can't wish for this kid to die. That's not right. So I don't know. I thought that the interactions with like even baby Ben with Lando they were sweet. They were nice.
There was a post on Tumblr a while back that was like, Snoke wants Kylo Ren to take over the galaxy and stay in the dark side forever, and Leia wants her baby boy to come home. So, which side are you siding with? Do you want to side with Snoke or do you want to side with Leia? And I always thought that was kind of an interesting argument, because it's like, yeah, why wouldn't you want him to be redeemed? Like, that's what Leia wants.
Yeah. And even to the end, like she gives up hope momentarily, but still, has that conversation with her brother and is able to like, hey, there's still hope. He's here. Hope never truly dies. Nobody's ever truly gone.
That line right there emotionally broke me. Not just as, because the line was with Carrie, for one, and because of what it meant for Ben Solo's redemption, but like personally it hit me, because just the idea that no matter how much I have failed in my life, I have not failed so badly that I can't come back. I am not truly gone. I can still, be someone that I can be proud of.
I'm really hoping that we're going to find that the saga itself is so layered and deep that we find years and years and years of enjoyment by seeing all the layers and seeing all the perspectives and seeing the, different points of view that we can take as we grow older. Will I find myself in a situation where I'm like Luke and I'm older and I feel utterly depressed and I need to figure out a way to come back from that? Will I be Leia and feeling like I can't reach my adolescence because I do have kids, and one of them is getting to that age where I can't always convince her of, that what I'm saying is good or coming from a place of love. I really hope that we get that out of the saga with the completion of 9, that it feels like just something that you can just grow with and see yourself in different phases of and find lessons as you grow older. I did want to just kind of read a couple of quotes and then maybe have you guys comment on it, because I think that this is kind of a nice way to, I don't know, maybe wrap it up a little bit. But so it all started out wanting to do a film for young people that had a psychological undercurrent for people who were going through adolescence. Everything from mythological themes to spiritual themes. In the end, I think that's the thing that resonates with people. And that was from George Lucas talking just before The Force Awakens came out about what the original trilogy was all about and why he created Star Wars.
I love that, because I think it's shown that, when, okay, I don't want to offend anybody, but when, you get angry fanboys screaming that the sequel trilogy sucks, it makes it clear that, like, Star Wars isn't necessarily always going to be for you. It's one of those things where, you have to take what you can out of it, but at its core, like, it may not resonate with you the way the original trilogy did, because you were a different person when the original trilogy came out. And so the idea that, the original trilogy was for people going through adolescence, the same as I really think the sequel trilogy is for people going through adolescence. And all 3 trilogies are really reflective of their times. And so it's hard for me to say, like, yes, all of these are meant to apply and be loved exactly the same by every single person, because, I wasn't even born when the original trilogy came out, and so I can't quite relate to the culture and society as it was right then. So I can enjoy the movie for what it is, but it doesn't, I mean, I love it. It's Star Wars, but it doesn't resonate with me the same way the sequel trilogy has.
And I think that that's like one of the most important things that you like that we can say, right, Amber, is sometimes Star Wars isn't always meant to speak directly to you. You can still enjoy it. And maybe if you can change your perspective, look at it from, that kid sitting next to you down the aisle who it is for, maybe you can get into their shoes and understand maybe what they're going through and understand why their generation might have it tougher. They have so many things going on for them right now that it is challenging and it is difficult. And there's this entire world order that is telling them to behave a specific way. Sometimes they don't even know what their place is in the world.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
Yeah. Ray, too. You didn't even bring up Ray.
Poor Ray.
I think that, that's a good point with, it's weird because the original trilogy resonated so much with me during my adolescence. And I'm sorry, again, with Last Shot, it was like an older Han Solo trying to deal with himself as a parent. And I appreciated that because it was kind of following my trajectory. The new, the sequels, they're not necessarily for me because I'm the grown up now. And it's reflecting this world that has changed. Darth Vader was this overt villain and Kylo Ren isn't an overt villain in the same way. When I first saw the original trilogy, obviously there were no prequels. I didn't know Anakin Skywalker from like a hole in the wall. He was Darth Vader and he was evil, and you knew he was evil because he was dressed in black and breathing through a mouthpiece, right? So now you go into this new sequel land of villains, and Kylo Ren is the perfect villain for today's society, somebody who looks back at the past and worships it erroneously. To try to find a place in the world. That's just, it's very much the villain that we have now. And I find that very interesting. And I find, the new, the Finn, Poe, Rey dynamic, I find it very interesting, but it isn't for me. It's for the adolescents. It's for the people growing up through this. It's for the people who need to find their found family. It's the people that need to grow up as well. It's Finn growing up. It's him breaking out from what he knew. It's Rey growing up. All of these things. It's not necessarily what adult me would have chosen for, the characters that I love, but I can accept that it's not necessarily for me, and I don't have to sit down and be like, man, I'm going to write a script of my own and try to get people to make a new movie. Like, that's ridiculous.
Who would do that, though?
do.
I think it's just a lovely point to make that if it's always been for the adolescents, I'm no longer an adolescent. So maybe these sequels aren't necessarily for me. And that's okay because they were fun anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And I totally get where you're coming from Last Shot. Like, as a parent, I call my son Big Guy. Like, as a baby, he was my big guy. So when Han called Ben Big Guy, it broke my heart, like, so much, because I'm like, how does any parent not want their child to come home, and be redeemed?
Can't relate, but I get where you guys are coming from because I have cats and I don't like when they get out of the house because I'm scared.
Good. 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 No.
I just wanted to be included.
I don't have kids, but it's that stage of life where you think about it, and when you think about wanting the best for something that you made this choice to have, you can't possibly be like, well, screw you, kid.
Why don't you just die? Yeah, no, it doesn't happen. No.
Right. Yeah. Right. And that was the thing for me, because, this knee-jerk reaction where I was like, well, you went to go save your dumb kid. Good job, Han Solo, walking in unarmed, But I think that as a parent, that's what he was supposed to do. And it didn't work, but that's what he was supposed to do.
Well, did it not work? Or, obviously he died, but, didn't it kind of open the path up a little bit?
I mean, one can hope, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it might have been the crack, right? The start of the crack. At least that connection.
split his soul to the bone.
And also his face, right?
Oh,
He has to wear it.
Yeah, he totally has to wear it, Lisa.
Sorry, I'm a little visceral, but it's okay. I guess for me it was like, would I have made my original heroes have such sad, sucky lives? No, probably not. But it does pass the torch to the new set of heroes.
And they didn't for the first 23 years, right? We know that. We know what their lives were. Luke was adventuring the galaxy until he decided to take Ben and start up a temple. We know Leia was a successful senator, and there was 23 years of peace. That's longer than the peace times or the non-war times between the Empire being created and Battle of Yavin 4. And Han stayed with her for a while and then went off and became a racing coach.
I mean, I think he was like kind of like almost like a military spouse, basically.
Yeah. No, I totally get that impression.
But I mean, that's normal for some people, especially when, she is who she is and had to do whatever she needed to do for the Senate. I mean, I think that we know, but didn't get to see the good times. And we kind of came into it when it had already gone bad for some years. And I think that would I have wanted that when I spent a fortune to, have Mark and Carrie and Harrison back? No, I wouldn't have done that. But
there's no story in the good times.
No, there isn't. And again, it's like this movie is about, the new characters, really. It passing the torch in whatever ways they need to pass the torch. And it's like George said, for the adolescents. It's got mythology and it's got, symbolism, and here it is for a new generation to find their people and get out of Star Wars what I did when I was in high school. And I think that that's meaningful in and of itself.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean that we won't get glimpses into the good times, I think, in the future, especially as 9 wraps up, or as we see kind of this intermediate time. We're going to see a little bit of after what's the galaxy like now with the New Republic, with Jon Favreau's live action show. We're going to see, the resistance, and we're going to kind of understand the rise of the First Order from that perspective. And once 9 happens, I totally think